If there's one thing that I can't stand, it's losing on PrizePicks. So for this video, the hat's coming off and the hoodie is going on. We're going to a place we've never gone before. We're going 0 dark 30. How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the channel. This is Out of Bounds. My name's CJ. In today's video, we're going to do another PrizePicks NBA board breakdown for January 5th. The time right now is about 12:30 p.m. Why that's important is because these projections on PrizePicks change all day long. So if you see a projection of 40 for Rudy Gobert, there's a good chance that it won't be 40 later. It could go up, it could go down. Something to keep in mind. If this is your first time to the channel, it's good to have you. Hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, leave a like, comment below, and let me know what you would like to see from this channel. I'm constantly working to improve it and make it better for you. Typically, I start off with news, but in today's case, there's not much news to report on. The biggest story is Kevin Durant. He's going to be missing tonight's game, which means there could be increased minutes and increased usage and production for the other guys on the Brooklyn Nets. But we'll talk about that in just a moment. First and foremost, we're going to start by comparing the projections on PrizePicks against 3 other sites. For this video, we use Rotogrinders, we use Fantasy Pros, and we use Rotowire. So we do a little bit of a comparative analysis. So we'll start with Rudy Gobert, who's projected for 40 points. We head on over here to Rotogrinders. We filter out just the centers. That's all we care about in this case. And you can see that Rudy Gobert's projected for 40.78, which would put him slightly over his projection tonight. If we head on over to Fantasy Pros, he's projected for 41.6, which would put him slightly over once again. And over here on Rotowire, they have him at 39.06, which would put him slightly under. So let's take a look at the game logs real quick, as we always do. Let's get a snapshot here of Rudy Gobert's last 3 games: 39.8, 30.3, and 41.7. Now, if you look at his minutes, he's only played 30 or more minutes in 2 games this season. In the other 4 games, he's had less than 30 minutes. Why that's important? Well, if you played PrizePicks last night, there was a lot of blowouts. Unfortunately, I was the victim on the wrong end of a lot of those blowouts. Some of the guys that I played didn't get a full run of minutes, which ended up hurting their final fantasy point production. So it's just something to keep in mind. We want to see these guys, especially when we bet the over, get as many minutes as possible. The 34 to 36 range would be ideal. But in this case, Gobert looks like a safe bet for right around that 40-point mark. So in this situation, I would probably fade Gobert. I don't feel strongly about him one way or another. So in this case, I think we can probably put our money down on somebody else and find a better play. Speaking of better play, increased production, Kyrie Irving, Brooklyn Nets, facing the Utah Jazz tonight. He's projected for 49 points, which is a little bit higher than what we've seen him at recently. Typically with Kevin Durant in the lineup, Kyrie's projection has been anywhere from like 42 to 45 points on most nights. It makes a lot of sense for them to bump his fantasy projections up quite a bit, because he should see more usage, more scoring opportunities, and just more production across the board. So if we go over to Rotogrinders, we filter to point guard. 50.3, that would be over his PrizePicks projection. Over on Fantasy Pros, they have him at 42.3, so quite a big difference. They're 8 points under Rotogrinders. And finally, Rotowire, they have him at 43 as well. So I don't know if they're taking into consideration that Kevin Durant's not going to be in the lineup, but Rotowire and Fantasy Labs seem to be underweight on Irving. I think he's more up in that 45 to 50 point range tonight. Let's take a look at his game logs real quick. He's got 58 in his last game, 42, 41, 36, 58, and 35. So they may be looking at kind of what his season average has been, and that's where they're coming up with those lower projections. But I'm not so sure that they're taking into consideration that Kevin Durant won't be in the lineup tonight. So I'm thinking that 50 is very real possibility here. This game is projected to stay close. I'm going to take the over on Kyrie Irving. I think 49 might just be slightly under, and that he should be able to get past that 49-point mark with 50 or more PrizePicks points. We'll skip over the next few guys. We'll head over to the next game, which is the Los Angeles Lakers versus the Memphis Grizzlies. Anthony Davis, the Brow. Let's see what he's projected for on all the various sites. 46.84 on Roto Grinders. We head on over to Fantasy Pros. 54.6, so a huge difference. You go from 46 to 54. Quite a big jump there. And then we head over to Rotowire. Anthony Davis is projected for 46. So two of the sites have him under 50. One site has him over 50. I tend to agree that he'll probably stay under 50 tonight. Let's take a look at his game logs real quick and see. Over his last few, 44 points, 59 points, and 39 points. So it's kind of been a mixed bag for AD all season, even going back to his previous games, 32, 49, 25. It's kind of been this roller coaster ride when you roster Anthony Davis and you play him. You're not really sure what to expect. I mean, minutes-wise, he's getting 30-plus minutes on any given night. Even the nights where he gets a big helping of minutes, 37 minutes here, he only produced 32 fantasy points. So in this situation, with the spread being what it is, I can understand why PrizePicks has him at 46. I don't think this is going to be another one of those games where he puts up a monster number of 50 or more. 46 seems to be pretty on point, but you could tell, from the other sites that they're pretty torn on what Anthony Davis may do tonight. In a situation where it could be a blowout like tonight with the Lakers and Grizzlies, I'm going to take the under on Anthony Davis and assume that they do, in fact, blow out Memphis and that this game gets out of hand pretty quickly. So the other side of the ball, we'll talk about Jonas Valanciunis. He's projected for 34 points tonight. We filter over to the center position. Valenciunis has a projection of 33.82. Filter over to the centers here. Valenciunis projected for 31. And the last site here, Rotowires, Valenciunis is projected for 31.79. So all three sites, they typically agree here on what Valenciunis will do tonight. They all have him going under his PrizePicks projected points. Let's take a look at his game logs. His last game was against the Lakers. He put up 28.5 points. Previous game, 28.5 points. And the game before that, 29.7. So 3 games in a row going under 30 points. Again, if you feel like this game gets out of hand, I would probably lean toward taking the under on Valenciunis tonight. I think that could be a good play for you. Let's head over to the next game. We've got the Minnesota Timberwolves versus the Denver Nuggets. This game tips off at 9:10 p.m. There's not a lot to love on the Minnesota side. We'll stick with D'Angelo Russell for today. We skipped over him in the last video because, as I mentioned, he just hasn't been very good. He did have a pretty good game in his last game, however, so he may be worth looking into. So let's head over to Roto Grinders. We'll filter out all the positions except for point guard. And on FanDuel, it doesn't look like D'Angelo Russell is listed at point guard. He is actually listed at shooting guard. Good to know. 35.59 is his projection on FanDuel. Roto Grinders. 36.3 on Fantasy Pros. And if we head over to Rotowire, D'Angelo Russell, 34.54. So a lot of the sites here, they think that he's going to go under that 37-point projection. We can look at his game logs once again to paint a better picture. As I mentioned before, he had a good game last game, 39.3, which would put him over tonight's projection. Previous game, 21, 34, 7.5, 37.4, and 31. So it's been an up and down season, mostly down for D'Angelo Russell. His last game where he put up the 39.3 was against Denver, who is tonight's opponent. Something to keep in mind. There's a real shot that he can go over once again in this matchup. However, keep in mind, Denver is an 11-point favorite at home tonight. There's blowout potential here. If they do blow out, D'Angelo Russell will probably go under. So you got to keep the blowouts in mind. I lost a lot of money last night because of blowouts. So one tip that I have for you, though, speaking of blowouts, is playing those second half games. So whenever you see a game starting to trend toward a blowout, maybe it's a double-digit lead heading towards halftime, it's not a bad idea to take a few guys from that game for second half and pick unders on them. Or if there's young guys that you want to pair with those, older guys that might get benched early. So, for example, D'Angelo Russell, example of a veteran that will probably get benched early in a blowout. But if you go on the other side of that, you can pair him with a guy like, you could go Jokic under, and then you can go maybe like a Beasley over if you think Beasley gets a few extra minutes. So just something to keep in mind. While we're on this game, we got to talk about Nikola Jokic. He's projected for 51 tonight. I took him the other night. I think he was also 51. I took the over. It ended up blowing out, so I ended up losing with Jokic. But for tonight's game, he's projected for almost 55 on Roto Grinders. Switch over to the center position on Fantasy Pros. They're right on the money too. Almost 55 there. And 48 on Rotowire. So two of the sites like the over. One site likes the under. Let's pop into the game logs real quick. As I mentioned, he was projected for 51 the last time these two teams met. Ended up going under because of foul trouble and because of a blowout later in the game. Previous game, 46.3, and the game before that, 52. So he's a tricky guy to project because obviously you look at his game logs, 68 points here, 69 points there, 52 points. 51 is definitely well within reach, but the key for him is going to be seeing the minutes. So 41 minutes here, 38 minutes here, 34 minutes here, and 38 minutes there. So if you feel like Jokic gets a full run and that this game stays competitive and stays close throughout, then absolutely go ahead and take the over on Jokic. But tonight, and probably due to some recency bias, I'm going to take the under on Jokic and hope that he doesn't hit the 51-point marker. On to the next game, the San Antonio Spurs versus the Los Angeles Clippers. We've got Demar Derozan projected at 39 points. Let's take a look at Derozan. He's projected for 39.72 on Roto Grinders. He's projected for 40.5 on Fantasy Pros. And he's projected for 35.31 on Rotowire. So if we pop in to the game logs and take a peek at what he's done recently, he's got 35 against Utah, 47 against the Lakers, and 42 against the Lakers. This will be his first meeting with the Clippers. Hasn't faced off against them before, so we don't have any previous game logs to compare to. But as you can see here, DeRozan has had a pretty good season for the most part. Most games he's putting up 40 plus fantasy points or more, 42, 47, 49, 57. A couple of down games, but for the most part, you can expect him to get 40 or more. I like the over on DeRozan for that reason. Flip over to the other side of the game, Kawhi Leonard. Obviously, he sustained a nasty little facial injury. He's probably still not 100%, working his way back from that. Tonight, they've got him at 48 points over on Roto-Grinders. Flipping over here to Fantasy Pros, he's projected for 48 as well. Last but not least, Rotowire has him for 44, so they're a little under compared to the previous two sites. Taking a look at his recent game logs, 30 points, so very under the standard for Kawhi Leonard. 61, massive game, and then 54. So anywhere from 30 to 60 points is what we can expect. Obviously, as I mentioned before with DeRozan, this will be the first time that the Clippers and Spurs have faced off, so we don't have any previous game logs. This game is projected to be somewhat of a blowout risk. 117 for LA, 109 for San Antonio. So if you have one of these big projected guys like Kawhi Leonard, like a Paul George, who are expected to go for 40 plus points, if this game blows out, that's where things get tricky. So in this situation, I'm probably going to go under on Kawhi Leonard. It's really going to be a close call. The blowout situations are just tricky. They're tricky to project. Moving on, we'll go to the next game. Chicago Bulls versus the Portland Trailblazers. Zach Levine, he's projected for 41 points tonight. I believe they have him listed at shooting guard on FanDuel. By the way, we use FanDuel's projections because their scoring system is the exact same as PrizePicks. So if you're wondering why we use FanDuel and why we reference FanDuel for everything in these videos, it's because FanDuel and PrizePicks, it's the same. So Zach Levine, projected for 41.35. Levine on Fantasy Pros, projected for 40.9. And last but not least, Rotowire's projections for Levine, he's projected at 40.24. So a lot of people think he's going to be in that 40-ish point range. Let's see what his game logs say. Huge game, his last game, 58.7 against Dallas. Previous game was a Debbie Downer, 27.2 against Milwaukee. And the game before that, 39.7 points against Washington. No previous games against the Trailblazers, so we don't have anything really to compare him to. But in this situation, seeing that he's only went over tonight's projection a handful of times, 58, 47, and 50, it's kind of like one of those coin flip situations. The projections on this game for game total and spread, 121.25 for Portland, 111.75 for Chicago. Portland, they're expected to win by 10 or more points. So for me, I'm expecting blowout as well. So I'll say under on Zach Levine. On the other side, Damien Lillard, 48 points. Huge number. Once again, we talked about blowout potential. 48 points is a lot for Damien Lillard. He's been a guy this season that I've taken the under on more often than not, and it's worked out for me. He's had a couple of great games, but most of his games, he's been under on his PrizePicks projections. So let's take a look and see if Roto-Grinders agrees on an under for Lillard. They do, 44.15. Flipping over to Fantasy Pros, they've got him for 46.4, but Rotowire has a different projection for him, 43.55. So everybody is under on Damien Lillard. It lines up with what I've just told you, that Lillard has been a guy that we want to hit under on pretty much every night. And just to dig in a little deeper, his game logs pretty much echo what I'm telling you. So 37.8 would be way under tonight's projection. 52.8, big game. That would be an over for tonight's projection. But 31 would be under, 41 would be under, 49.5 would be a slight over, and 29.3 would be way under. So for those reasons, Damian Lillard would be an under for me tonight. We we will look at his running mate, CJ McCollum, who's had some great games. He's actually maybe played better than Dame over the last couple of games, even to start the season. Lillard's kind of been off to a slow start, as you saw from his game logs. McCollum, however, projected for 38 tonight. So let's filter over to shooting guard on Roto Grinders and see what they have to say about it. They like the over on McCollum, which is kind of where I was leaning when we clicked his name. 36.8. They like the under. So we've got 1 for over, 1 for under. And finally, 34.53. So they like the under on McCollum. Well, let's look at his game logs and see how realistic it is for him to go over his projection tonight. 51, huge over, 44, 36, 50, 62, and 35. So as you can see, this guy's been outplaying Damien Lillard. He's put up massive games, 50, 62, 44, 51. Only 2 that were really considered duds or a stinker type of performance. So for that reason, I'm going to go CJ McCollum over on CJ McCollum. Now, typically, I'd end the video right here. But you guys in the Discord, by the way, link in the description below to join the Discord. If you haven't joined yet, that's where all the PrizePicks chit chat goes down. But you guys in the Discord, you guys wanted me to end the video with my lock, my lead pipe lock, the one guy that I really like tonight. So I'm going to do that for you. We skipped over him earlier, but we're going to talk about him right now. I wanted to save him for this very moment. Caris LeVert, 33.5. We mentioned at the top of the show that Kevin Durant would be out tonight and that other guys would have to absorb his production and pick up some of the slack with him not in the lineup. Caris LeVert, why do I like him? Well, I'll tell you why. With guys like Kevin Durant out of the lineup, Caris LeVert, he's going to be asked to score a lot more than he normally would. So if we look at his projection tonight, I think he's listed under shooting guard. He is. He's projected for 32 minutes and 34 fantasy points. Okay. We'll take a look at Fantasy Pros for LeVert. 28.2. They're way underweight on him. Way underweight. I guarantee that he scores more than 28 tonight. And finally, 32.43. I think that's too light as well. So I like LeVert. I think even if this game blows out, LeVert plays a healthy amount of minutes. Hopefully it does. And then Kyrie goes to the bench and then they just let LeVert run wild. I think LeVert and Kyrie play really well together. I think if you look at LeVert's game logs, his upside is definitely there when he gets more opportunities and more run. You got a 45er here. You got 61 here. Okay, so the games where he's playing more minutes, he had 38 minutes in this game. I expect him to get 30-plus minutes tonight. Roto Grinders agrees with me. They have him currently set at 32 minutes. Truthfully, I think he even gets more than that. I think he creeps into the 34 to 36 range, especially if this thing stays competitive. I mean, they're going to need this guy to score. Without Kevin Durant in there, it's going to be Kyrie and it's going to be Caris LeVert. So for that reason, I'm taking Caris LeVert as my lock for the night, and I'm taking the over on LeVert. I think he does big things tonight. So let me know what you think, though. Who's your lock of the night? Maybe it's not Caris LeVert. Maybe it's somebody else. I'd like to know who that person is. And are you taking the over or are you taking the under on the guy? Leave that down in the comments below. I check all of them. I reply to all the comments that you guys leave. I appreciate all your support. I appreciate the likes, the subscribes, the shares, the everythings that you guys do for this. So until next time, this has been CJ for Out of Bounds. Let's make some money tonight so I don't have to wear this hoodie tomorrow because it's hot as hell. Peace.